What's up, blockheads? Today I'm going to share some of my campaign builds. From mining and combat to frog at Uber services, the Pioneers campaign is going to require a lot of engineering. For early game combat, I went with a fast attack car. I used 6 wheels for redundancy and traction. I also use rear and front wheel steering for a really snappy turning radius. My tip here is to turn down the angle on the rear wheel hinges. The more power you add, the more likely you are to just spin out when you turn at speed. I also set my smart cannons on timers. This reduces my rate of fire a bit in exchange for a much longer burst of damage. Working with a few power cores can feel very limiting, but learning where and how to use aerodynamic blocks can make a big difference. Your top speed may be improved a lot more by adjusting your aero rather than adding the bulk and weight of another engine. In the water, I went fast. If you saw my Stranded series, you recognize this boat design. This catamaran style boat is my go-to in Trailmakers for combat or campaign. This design is meant to be fast. With the way Trailmakers calculates drag, it's very punishing in the water. So reducing your drag profile below the surface will have a massive effect on your top speed. With this design, my drag profile in the water is only 4 blocks wide, but I have the stability of a vessel that's over 16 blocks wide. In addition, placing aero blocks at the back of your build will improve your speed a lot more than another engine. For kicks, I gave the cockpit section variable geometry. I can raise it up away from the water and I can get 1 more mile per hour of speed. Worth it! And in combat, I can lower the cockpit closer to the water, lowering my center of mass and making the boat even more stable. When it was time to take on passengers, I just bolted the seats I needed onto the outer pontoons and it worked great. You'll notice a theme with my weapon loadout. I really preferred smart cannons for their quick target lock and excellent range, and I had a small cannon for good stopping power. I never really embraced the EMP in this game, but man, it is really effective against botnacks. In the water, when you catch them right at the water's surface, an EMP blast will launch them right into the air, making them easy targets for my smart cannons. I have to admit that this bad boy was the star of my playthrough. After getting myself into a really dumb situation in the wetlands, I decided I had to go Amphibious. Again, you may recognize this design from my Stranded playthrough. Bad Maw in Stranded was a heavy, dense beast made to carry massive salvage blocks. This version is light and built for mining and combat, and rock crawling, because flexing is light. Early game I started with a 6-wheel version, and as I upgraded I made it more buoyant and aerodynamic underwater, eventually earning enough power cores to add the final outboard engines. It's not fast on land or water, but anywhere it's deployed it dominates the terrain. I admit it's a little underarmed for endgame combat, but I found myself getting good use of my EMP blasts for crowd control, and I never really felt like I needed more weapons. When it was time to take to the sky and I unlocked balloons, I said no thanks. I chose to grind for power cores and build an old school helicopter engine stabilized flyer. It was janky and slow and had no weapons, but it got the froggets back home and it did its job. After I defeated the final drill, I updated it with actual gyros and converted it into a hover miner. Here are the basics of using helicopter engines for dampening. You'll need 2 engines on each axis, spinning in opposite directions. I chose to omit my yaw stabilization due to a lack of power cores. So for full stabilization on all 3 axes, you'll need a total of 6 helo engines, then a separate one for actual steering or other controls. 6 gimbal jets provide my main lift, while a set of 4 thrusters helps me stay up. Keeping the gimbal power just under what's needed to keep me up allows me to go up and down without needing pitch controls. I used a sensor to toggle an automatic hover system so I can focus on keeping this pig going the right direction without having to manage my altitude. All I really used this thing for was froglet rescue, but it did a really good job. Now my starter plane was pretty basic. I surprisingly felt OP with only 2 smart cannons and a bomb bay for my weapons, and virtually all of my combat was air to ground now. For engine power, I use a prop engine in the nose, and I just added the rest of my power cores into thrusters. For a low power core plane, it's not bad at all. When I fought the final boss, I had only added 1 more smart cannon to its loadout. And it was no problem. I actually ended up trying to fling bombs into the weak spot to add some challenge to the fight for me. Once I had defeated the final boss, I got to upgrading it to its final campaign form. I added rockets, swapped out the prop engine for some dragon thrusters, and I reversed the wings because they just looked bad. Then I added air brakes and I zero-dragged the piston glitch. This was a mistake. Real quick explanation for new players. Zero drag is an exploit used in Trailmakers to remove all drag calculations from a build. It works because the game calculates the drag on a build when you exit build mode. When blocks are removed from the build, like from combat or crashing, the drag from those blocks is removed from the equation. But the game has no way to read any new drag, so it's just removed and not replaced by anything. Using detachable blocks, you can remove all the drag, or just the drag from a few blocks like I did. Generally, players will link the detachable blocks to a logic switch that removes them the instant the build is spawned in. If you want to use zero drag in the campaign, you can, but since the build registers as broken when the blocks are detached, and since you're forced to repair before entering build mode, you won't be able to work on the plane again. So don't set your detachable blocks up on the always on switch. You'll need to detach them manually. I almost lost this build when I discovered this. I didn't have it saved, and in campaign, I couldn't get into build mode to fix it, and I couldn't get the build into sandbox because it wasn't saved. I eventually managed to get it into build mode by spamming the build button as I was repairing, but it was a giant pain in the ass. The other problem with zero drag in campaign is the way the game transfers damage when you transform to another build. The detachable blocks count as broken, so it removes blocks from the build you transform into, and it seems to pick the same blocks every time, at least in campaign. So that's a thing now. I honestly recommend just avoiding zero drag for campaign. Alright, what else? My froglet transport for land. Wemplar nicknamed it the Swedish hot dog, and I fully approve. Oh, and there was this one-time use heavy cargo carrier that I had no interest in making it pretty, as you could surely tell. But it did that one job for that one mission when I needed it to. Okay, blockheads, that's all for today. If you have questions, I have answers, so ask away in the down below. I'll see you in the next one, Trailmaker. Peace.